late. Oh.
Coming up on Videogame Nation, zip up your leather and stock up on gasoline. We're talking Mad Max. Dan puts the pedal to the metal on his top 5 cars. Our motley crew of war pups lays out their plans for the post-apocalypse, and the team ignores the carnage around them for a quick game of car soccer with Rocket League. Is the riot afterwards what ended Mad Max's world? That's this week on Videogame Nation. Hello television friends. Hi Def, high five. Yep, it's the Mad Max episode, which I've been given to host since I share a haircut with the villain from the latest movie. Of course, Aoife also has the same haircut, but I have an Australian accent, so chalk this up to the first time that's ever been an advantage. Mad Max is a cherished piece of Australian cult cinema. The original taught us the joy of wearing leather in the desert, and its sequels taught us that there's nothing in the world scarier than a man in a hockey mask with furry underpants, except for Tina Turner in furry underpants with no hockey mask. With Mad Max Fury Road a critical and commercial smash, it was invariable it would get a spin-off game. But what's it like stepping into Max's world of bone-dry land and bone-snapping action? The apocalypse has happened, but damned if anyone knows how. Mad Max has assembled everything he needs for his one shot at happiness. A leather jacket, a powerful car, a picture of his family, all the supplies he needs to escape his dusty, savage world. But wouldn't you know it, suddenly he's jumped by goons and everything is stolen. You might recognise that as the plot of God of War 2 and 3, or just any game that decides it's more fun trying to reclaim power than just having some, which maybe it is, but it disappoints me every time. Not one to let a brutal beating get in his way, Max jumps aboard the lead villain's rig. You know he's the villain because he needs a dog in the face. So Max offers him a haircut with a spinning chainsaw. That's a lot of action so far, and I hadn't done any of it, but I was still happy. When the gameplay begins, you'll notice that Max, without his trademark jacket, looks a lot like Nathan Drake from Uncharted, which is the start of the game feeling like a lot of other games. Running from point to point in the desert feels like Red Dead Redemption without all the majesty and big hats. Plus there's a dog to care about, so shades of Fable 2 there. Oh, and the environment is stark and rocky, with bonus points for knocking over the totems of the warlord running the area you live in. And those are game mechanics lifted straight out of Red Faction Guerrilla. It turns out your car has been destroyed, so what was once an action game about getting back your vehicle and the one remnant of your maybe dead family is now a game about scavenging parts so you can escape a strange wasteland, which you might remember as the plot from Toe Jam and Earl. So the game starts off with impressive action and then becomes a lot of what I've seen before, but the lore of the game is huge. The menu full of character bios is genuinely interesting and adds depth to the grit. Now, how has the Mad Max franchise maintained its appeal for so very, very long? Well, as with all things Australian, we ask the folks who clearly know best. Here's a bunch of English people.
I think Mad Max, it just is the post-apocalypse. When you look at every other post-apocalyptic thing that most people do, whether it be in movies or TV or video games, that idea of the post-apocalypse is Mad Max.
I think Mad Max has endured because it's so stylish, and it's an apocalypse that isn't just grey and brown. And I think the kind of stylized nature of it is what keeps it alive in people's imagination.
I think it's the outfits, really. I think they're quite camp, aren't they? There's a lot of leather, a lot of chaps going on, and the makeup. I think it's the fashion.
There are parts of this savage, dirty game that are just a bit good. The next-gen graphics are tremendous. The game's sandstorms are a real sight to behold, and the hot air balloons that serve as vantage and fast travel points are a great surprise. But here's the trouble. Remember how you're in a wasteland? For the very first time in a post-apocalyptic game I've played, that actually meant something. And my great shortage of ammo meant that I had to fight hand-to-hand most of the time. And wouldn't you know it, the hand-to-hand fights use the same mechanics as the Batman Arkham games, with the downside that you're not Batman, you're a bloke in a skivvy using the same 3 moves to fight what seems to be the same 3 guys. The most interesting feature of the game is your mechanic mate Chumbucket, who's got his own car-based religion. He fixes your car constantly, and he lives in the belly of a beached ship. He's the best pal you'll ever have, who you won't want to leave alone with your car, since he seems to have a kind of unnatural connection to it. Now praise be to the cosmic crankshaft. If you are going to survive in this place of death, you will need the best car possible. Here's the panel to discuss what goes into their perfect hell on wheels.
My magnum opus would definitely have a multitude of cup holders. Like the dashboard would just be almost entirely cup holders.
It's got to be 8 cylinders, nothing less.
My perfect vehicle will probably be something low maintenance with good fuel economy, probably a nice big boot as well. So like the Nissan Note, I drive a Nissan Note, that's quite a good car.
My perfect vehicle, I think if I could go everywhere in the HMS Victory, done. I go around everywhere in a regal old ship, put some robotic legs on it so I can walk around everywhere because you can only really go by sea. Me stood at the front, saluting, looking regal, wearing one of those big hats. Mate, I'll be living the life.
Mad Max is fun. Mad Max is bleak. Mad Max feels like a well-made version of everything we expect from a sandbox game, but with added vehicular mayhem. It's Grand Theft Diesel, Red Dead Redemption with cars, Red Faction leather, and Saints Row 5 sand gets everywhere. I liked the promise of the characters and the game lured me in. But I wasn't amazingly impressed. Sure, I want to own and upgrade my own car, but a quest for vengeance is more than scavenging around. And the game has the plot of a dad spending a weekend at the rubbish dump looking for scrap. And that makes sense because this is a game built from the scrap of other games. Now fire up the nitro and set your face to bearded. Here's Dan with his top 5 cars in gaming.
This ain't a car. It's just a mess of parts.
Like some sort of post-apocalyptic boy racer, Mad Max Rokitansky is obsessed with building the ultimate car. No attempting to rebuild civilization for this man, no sir, not when he's too busy upgrading his grille and choosing the right hood ornament because, you know, priorities. And still, even if he does complete his so-called magnum opus, it's gonna have some job competing against these magnificent gaming motors. First up, a car that shares its name with Mad Max's dearly departed cinematic motor, last seen taking a trip to the great scrapyard in the sky after being totaled on the Fury Road.
But that's where the similarities begin and end. This Interceptor is a gleaming white speed machine armed with machine guns, missiles, oil slicks, smoke screens, and it can turn into a boat. If that all sounds a bit James Bond, that's because 1983's Spy Hunter was originally meant to be a Bond game, but its makers couldn't get the license.
Mass Effect's Mako is named after one of the fastest, deadliest sharks in the world, but that's really where the similarities end.
This slightly cumbersome all-terrain buggy attracted a lot of criticism from those who thought it got in the way of boldly going where no man has gone before, by which I mean inside an alien lady's undercrackers. But driving the Mako was way more entertaining than a few seconds of implied intimacy. Its bouncy physics made pootling around the game's mountainous planetscapes great fun, especially as it was near impossible to flip it over onto its roof, which certainly didn't stop me attempting to do so.
The Mako also represents the only time that Mass Effect really afforded the player any freedom to explore the galaxy beyond the restrictive walls of its various mines, research facilities and rubbish nightclubs. It was sorely missed in the 2 sequels, and I only hope that it, or an upgraded model, returns for 2016's Mass Effect Andromeda. The craziest taxi I've ever been in was a battered Volkswagen Golf driven by a disheveled guy with some extreme views on immigration. We're still in touch.
He wouldn't have made a good fit alongside Beady Joe, Gina and the rest of the crazy taxi gang, although his attitude to passenger and pedestrian safety was distressingly similar. The titular cabs are suitably named, armed with hair-trigger accelerators and secret functions that definitely aren't street legal. Figuring out the science behind cryptic techniques like the crazy drift and limiter cut was a big part of what made Crazy Taxi such a deceptively tricky game to master, and probably the closest a driving game will ever get to fighting game style technicality.
The M12 Force Application Vehicle, commonly referred to as the Warthog, presumably because it sounds cooler than M12 Force Application Vehicle, is probably the 3rd best known part of the Halo universe behind Master Chief and Cortana.
And why shouldn't it be? With its green, angular armoured chassis and total absence of charisma, it's basically Master Chief in vehicular form. It's the vehicle that forced players to rewire their brains after years of traditional driving games, thanks to its counterintuitive camera-based steering.
It's also the motor that popularised virtual carpooling, with enough room for a co-op partner to hop on and provide fire support against the Covenant while you battle against an even greater enemy, the control scheme. In this post-Gran Turismo age, we're spoiled for choice when it comes to jumping behind the wheel of a real-life Dreamobile. If you can name it, you can probably drive it. If not in GT, then certainly in Forza, Project Cars, or something equally tedious.
Sorry, not a driving sim fan. Anyway, it was a different story in the 80s and 90s, where entire games would be built around a single luxury car like Jaguar XJ220 and Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge. But the daddy of them all is Sega's Outrun, which gave you a guy, a girl, and a gleaming Ferrari Testarossa for the lucky couple to hoon around in.
The premise of Outrun is fairly peculiar in that you're participating in a point-to-point race that's clearly a big deal, at least judging by the number of people who've shown up to see you cross the starting line, but you're not actually racing against anybody, and there are 5 different finish lines in 5 completely different locations. So what, are people just going to show up at each one in the hope that you might go to that particular location?
Flawed plot aside, Outrun perfectly captures the carefree spirit of speeding along the coast, the wind whipping through your hair and the love of your life by your side before you lose control in a hairpin bend, fly out of the car because you're not wearing your seatbelt because it's the 80s and miraculously survive, only to get a huge ticking off from your girlfriend for your gross incompetence.
So yes, Outrun is ultimately about being a rich, irresponsible idiot. And with the Ferrari Testarossa being the car of choice for rich, irresponsible idiots of the time, it's the perfect marriage of theme and content.
Congratulations!
Break time now, and if you can avoid the rampaging hordes of freaks trying to steal your gasoline, we will see you in just a minute.
We'd all just be stuffed. We'd be completely stuffed.
The cat's injured. Again? This itch isn't going to scratch its itch isn't going to scratch itself.
Welcome back. The apocalypse. All that gore, all that misery, all that fun. In the world of gaming, the end of the world is a surprisingly popular holiday destination. And now here's our panel of industry experts to pick their favourite Armageddons.
Post-apocalyptic games are kind of grim, but I also think they're a fantasy. The fantasy is that if everything, went to hell, you'd still be able to survive. I think the reality is that not very many of us would be able to survive, unless you've spent the last several years hoarding canned food and watching Bear Grylls do his thing. I think we'd all just be stuffed. We'd be completely stuffed.
I think the post-apocalyptic sort of theme taps into maybe a fear that we all have, that, because we all sort of go around the world, doing our jobs and, having kids and all this normal stuff, but it is a house of cards, isn't it? It could all come crashing down at any moment because of like a rogue virus or a meteor hitting planet Earth or Greg's running out of steak bakes. If anything of those things happen, absolute pandemonium, society would just collapse. And I think post-apocalyptic games are interesting because they sort of, let us explore that idea and sort of think about how we'd behave if that did happen.
I know developers certainly love post-apocalyptic games because it lets you have a giant map that you can play around in and actually not fill it with much stuff, because making stuff is really hard for developers. So if you just put these sparse bits of content around, you can get away with not actually having a very big game, but tricking players into thinking that your world is huge.
It's all the fun of nuclear holocaust, but without the tedious burning skin and radiation sickness.
My favourite game in post-apocalypse is easily The Last of Us. I try to think of a different one because I talk about The Last of Us a lot on the show, but it's just perfect. It's so well researched and designed. Every single landscape you come across feels real. And that reality is like the balancing of it being all horrible and dilapidated and dead, but also beautiful and alive and overgrown. And yeah, to me, nothing else has that impact, and it makes what is a really linear game feel completely vast and epic.
So is that everything you hope for?
I'm going to go old school for my favourite gaming post-apocalypse. It's Fallout, the original Fallout from 1997. And the reason I like it so much is that it's a game that's completely indifferent to you and your presence. You can die within a day of leaving your little vault. You can just die, and the game's like, tough luck, try again. And everywhere you go, terrible things will happen. And it's not trying to cater to you. It's not trying to be like, oh, the wasteland's so fun. Come and find some bottle caps. Have a great time with all these fun weapons. It's not like that at all. It's just like, yeah, this is what the apocalypse would be like. Everyone's terrible, and you've got no chance. I really like that.
Just be safe. Okay?
It feels like an obvious answer, but Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, I would say, is probably one of the best post-apocalyptic experiences that there is. Just exploring that world and discovering these like mad quests that you can go on. That captures like the sense of being in a world that's just been destroyed, and a world that's full of like mad casino owners, which I think would happen. Casino owners would definitely survive an apocalypse, like cockroaches.
I think there's always going to be a future for the genre. I mean, I'd like to see like a sci-fi post-apocalypse, like you're in space and the apocalypse event has happened and you're sort of trying a fare through space, sort of like Waterworld but not rubbish and in space. That'd be really interesting. Plus the sort of like scenes you could set and the stories you could tell in that atmosphere. It'd be like being in a submarine but in a post-apocalyptic land. Interesting.
Post-apocalyptic settings have become kind of cliched in all entertainment, not just in games, but there's still interesting things to be done with it, I think. Once you move past the sort of basics of survival, which I think have been covered over and over again, and the survival genre is huge now in games. Once you move past that and into the human stories about what's happening in the post-apocalypse, I think there's still a lot of ground to be trodden there.
I think there is a future for the genre because, you know, there'll always be an appetite for the sort of post-apocalyptic theme as there is for, you know, I don't know, zombies and football and racing and whatever. It's a genre now, isn't it? It's a thing. But I'd like to see a game that sort of invites you to make sort of realistic, intelligent decisions about survival because, like, for example, if there actually was an apocalypse, like, I wouldn't traverse the whole of the UK looking for a cure for the virus. Like, let someone else do that. I'd just hole up in Argos. They've got everything in there.
Mad Max wouldn't be Mad Max without its trademark convoy of ludicrously pimped out vehicles. Everyday motors are transformed into weaponized deathmobiles, custom built to survive the post-apocalyptic wasteland and reduce rivals to piles of twisted, smoking wreckage.
Which makes it all the more upsetting that the Mad Max game doesn't feature a multiplayer mode, because who wouldn't want to go mano a mano, or rather auto e auto, with other players in that world?
Still, we know from our Facebook page that you guys love a challenge, although seriously, Games Master was 17 years ago. I think it's time to move on. So we've had to look elsewhere for our futuristic four-wheel kicks. It's time to play some Rocket League.
If you don't know what Rocket League is, imagine football with flying cars. Well, that's it. It's Team Dan versus Team Aoife in 2v2 competition. Highest scoring team wins. To keep things fair, we've both teamed up with someone called Chris because that makes complete sense. And now it's over to Anthony Richardson in the commentary box.
Thanks, Aoife. Welcome to Rocket League. If Jeremy Clarkson could invent a sport, it would be this. All that's missing is the button to punch a subordinate. And this is the stadium they'll be playing in. There's the ball floating aimlessly around it without being touched much by some of the cars. That could even be the replay of the game we're about to watch. That's how we roll. Here are the teams. Aoife Wilson captains Team Aoife, a kamikazeing midfield general. In her spare time, she is Batman. Her teammate, Chris Bond. He's the heir to the Unibond empire. You want adhesives? You go to him. On Dan's team, Dan. He's just had his 900th birthday and celebrated with a nice meal before pillaging a Roman fort. He's teamed with Chris Slight, a solid aerial powerhouse much in the vein of Emil Heskey. Team Dan are in blue, Team Aoife in orange. What are they looking at? No idea. So here we are, the players rev their engines, important to boost right from kickoff, which neither team succeeds in doing. Chris Slight hanging back like a sock left in the washing machine. Aoife circling the ball like a futuristic shepherd. It's not left the halfway line yet, the ball. Sooner or later, it has! Aoife she's broken free! The Blues have been caught napping, but she hits the post. Oh, says Chris Bond, but you really should have been following up on the rebound. And in fact he does, but he sails over it rather unthreateningly. But Dan crosses it in front of his own net, and it's tapped in by his teammates. Oh, hang on, no, we'd skip forward, and it was actually an Aoife's net. Blimey, that was confusing. First blood to Dan, except there's no blood, because these are cars. Only a minute gone, early days yet. There's an explosion. Mercifully, no one was hurt. For some reason, that was amusing. They're fierce rivals, but they can enjoy a good laugh, much as I imagine the opposing nations had the occasional good chuckle during the Cold War. And it's going to be it's 2-0! It's 2-0! Aoife and Chris were sat with their trousers down, while Dan snuck in and stole the fresh pie from the windowsill. What a pie it was! Probably fruit-based with custard. Now 3 minutes to go. Again, Wilson Bond defences are breached. It must be a simple tap in. Here it is. But he's tapped himself. He's tapped himself in. Huge let off. Now Aoife to the rescue. Here she comes. A knight on past the ball in shining armour. She hasn't even touched the ball there. That was dreadful. And now the Blues are attacking. But again, they can't put the ball in. This is absolutely dreadful, dreadful Rocket League. Good grief, are you actually kidding me? Chris Bond here, look how hard he's concentrating, he shot it! But he hits the post again! Slight and Dan got out of jail there. Slight now aiming to add insult to injury, leaps under the ball. But that was deliberate, that was definitely deliberate, because it allowed Dan to ghost in unmarked to make it 3. Let's see that again. Here he comes, steaming in like a giant kettle on wheels. It's 3-0. Back with Chris Bond humming the song I Can Be Your Hero by Enrique Iglesias. But he shoots wide again. His aim is terrible. And you know this crack team of Dan and, other Chris will punish that mistake. And there it is! Stick a fork in this game, for it is done. Bond and Wilson let down the drawbridge, and Slight trotted right over it to enjoy the honey within. The honey castle. Aoife still smiling in her picture, but you rather sense that smile is masking a deep, deep pain. But here she comes to mop up the mess mopper. And it's 4-1, she's actually made it. Wow, is there time to get back into the game? My head says no. My heart also says no, but let's press on regardless. Let's just get this done now. Let's finish this game. 3, 2, 1. And that's it, the final countdown hooter is blown. Slight Mar, the victors, Wilson Bond, spent lemons. Here's the post-game soundbites.
This is my first challenge that I've won, is it? Really?
Well, I didn't score a goal, which I think is the point of the game, so that didn't go very well.
I'm meant to be playing Rocket League, not Sunday League against these losers. No, not really. No, they were terrible.
For something that I've never played before, I feel like I did all right. I warmed up towards the end.
I do feel good. I feel like all the times I didn't do well at sports, because obviously I would be on the team that would lose. I mean, you look at me, you're like, this is a man that gets picked last, but this time I got picked first.
Unfortunately, I had Chris Slight driving round like a little motorised cheerleader, just providing a little bit of support. I was a bit worried at the one point when I got, when Aoife used her telepathic abilities to exploderise my car, but there's no thing.
I feel like they deployed some psychological warfare that I fell for. They just didn't stop talking, and some people, some fives just don't know when to shut up when a 10 is talking, so what can you do?
That's it until next week, as long as the world doesn't end. Did you like Mad Max? Did you get mad at him? Are your eyes stinging from dust just looking at all these graphics? Well, tweet at us at #VGN, like the Video Game Nation Facebook page, and I will see you some other time. Bye.
Matthew Kelly's back, towering over his wannabe famouses on Stars in Their Eyes, tonight at 9 on Challenge.
The end is near, I see.